the one that got rid of Roe v. Wade, and everybody said that was an impossible thing to do. They've given the pro-life people, who are wonderful people and loving people, I've given them the power of negotiation, because now they're able to negotiate something that's going to be very important.
Said the way one might say, I'm the one who got Taylor Swift tickets. Who says that? Prepare to hear that sound in political ad after political ad after political ad for the next 12 months, as voters last night showed once again that they will not sit by quietly while Republicans try to strip away access to abortion health care. Republicans who were hoping that Americans had looked the other way or gotten over the fact that a constitutional right that had been enjoyed by Americans for 50 years was taken away from them. Anyone who thought that had gone away or ebbed was sadly mistaken. In every single election last night that was even tangentially about abortion, from Ohio Issue 1 enshrining a constitutional right to abortion access, to the Virginia state legislative elections, to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court election, to the Kentucky governor's race, voters sent a resounding message at the ballot box. No, thank you. We will not go back. Perhaps the biggest loser of the night was Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, who bet his political future on attempting to gaslight voters, saying that his proposed 15-week abortion ban wasn't an abortion ban at all. Here he is last night, just before the polls closed.
Well, I think our position in order to protect life at 15 weeks is a position that Virginians can come around. And it's one that nearly 70% of Virginians say that they can support. And I think this is a chance for Virginia to prove to be a leader, to bring people together around one of the most difficult topics in America. And I think we can lead here.
To that, Virginia said, no, thank you. Now, given the overwhelming evidence, the voters are out of step with the GOP position on abortion. Expect Republicans running in 2024, including the 4 times indicted ex-president, to try to launder their positions and votes and views on abortion. But never forget who got us here.
Today, I am keeping another promise to the American people by nominating Judge Neil Gorsuch of the United States Supreme Court to be of the United States Supreme Court. I will nominate Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the United States Supreme Court. Today, it is my honor to nominate one of our nation's most brilliant and gifted legal minds to the Supreme Court, Judge Amy Coney Barrett.
Joining our conversation, the president and CEO of the National Women's Law Center Action Fund, Fatima Goss-Graves. Also joining us, the editor-at-large of the 19th, MSNBC contributor Aaron Haynes, and Democratic pollster and MSNBC political analyst Cornell Belcher is here. Fatima, I go to you first. Your thoughts on last night?
I think what we learned last night is that people are ready to fight for their freedoms. They're ready to fight for our democracy. And when abortion is on the ballot, voters will show up. And they'll show up whether it is a constitutional amendment like you saw in Ohio, or whether the candidate is clear in their position, like you saw with the governor of Kentucky, who was clear in his support for access to abortion. And they aren't confused by this effort by Republicans to rebrand abortion in this moment. You cannot suddenly tell me that your efforts to ban abortion are a compromise or are reasonable or some other word. A ban is a ban, and it's extreme, and people are going to fight for their freedom. They're going to show up for themselves, but they're also showing up for everyone in their community.
Aaron, I think there might be a mistake, too, in how we've talked about it, even since Roe was overturned, in saying, well, independent women are out of reach. I mean, Republicans, Trump voters, voted on the side of abortion. I mean, in Kentucky, that's a plus 26 Trump state that reelected a Democratic governor who ran on abortion, who, specifically on the issue of eliminating exceptions in cases of rape. In Ohio, it's a state where Biden is polling at 41%. The issue won 20% on top of that. It's a plus 20 issue in Ohio. I mean, these are Republicans. These are Republican men. These are Trump voters voting to preserve or return to Roe.
Yeah, I think voters are paying attention. I mean, we talk about voter enthusiasm, for an election that's happening a year now. No, voters are locked in right now. And what they are saying is, to Fatima's point, you have the former president, you have Governor Youngkin trying to kind of do a revisionist history, if you will, about where their positions are now. For these voters, this issue is non-negotiable, and that's what they have said over and over and over again, whether abortion is literally or figuratively on the ballot. Ohio, red state, as you point out now, Nicole, these voters overwhelmingly choosing issue one, rejecting Glenn Youngkin's, he's talking now about how people may come around to a 15-week abortion ban when he clearly signaled that a statewide abortion ban was an option if Republicans had been able to regain control of the state house in Virginia. Voters understood that message. They understood what the stakes were on this. And let me also just say this. I mean, this issue absolutely gendered women continuing to galvanize and mobilize and be energized by this issue. But Republican men running on this issue continue to lose on this issue, and Democratic men who are running on this issue are winning. Look at what happened in Kentucky.
Yeah, I mean, Cornel, let me read you this from NBC's reporting on our exit polls. In Ohio, issue one was supported by majorities of men, women, white voters, black voters, and Hispanic voters, and across voters age 18 to 64, according to NBC News exit polling. And that was an affirmative vote to enshrine abortion rights into the state constitution. What is it that Democrats should do this morning, today, and tomorrow?
Well, thanks, Nicole. But I want to step back for a moment and talk a little bit about campaigns and issues in the context. And I want to pick up on something Fatima said about rights, right? So you all see the polling and the economy, inflation, and crime and border security are all top tier issues. And in some of these polls, reproductive rights is maybe a third or fourth thing down. And people will say, well, the campaigns, elections are all about the economy and crime. There's a difference between a top issue concern and a mobilizing issue. And look, the economy, and this is some of our friends in the media who I think oversimplify the narrative too often, because they certainly did that going into the last midterm. And I think to a certain extent they did it going into this election too, when they saw the economy as a top issue and they say, oh, the election is going to be all about the economy and it's economy, and that's all that should be talked about. There's a difference between an issue concern and a mobilizing issue. And clearly what you have with the rights of women being taken away from them, individuals losing their rights and having the government tell them what they can do with their bodies is a mobilizing issue, right? And in politics, we look for those issues that will rally voters and to mobilize them. I hate to say this, but the economy as a top issue isn't often the same mobilizing issue the way taking away rights are. And to a certain extent, I think we've also oversimplified the narrative for even around reproductive rights because, and you know this, Nicole, because you're a political hack like I am, there's no such thing as a silver bullet in politics. There just isn't. And I think, yes, reproductive rights is front and center and it's a really mobilizing issue. But it is not. But voters are complicated and are complicated and not one-dimensional. And I think what reproductive rights really, in lots of ways, stands for is a doorway. It's the most obvious doorway issue to a larger conversation that Americans are feeling about their rights being taken away, and authoritarianism and racism on the rise, and extremism on the rise. So I think there's a broader thematic connection to this really central mobilizing front and center issue of reproductive rights.
Okay.